All right, so today we're talking about how to keep your social enterprise or your business cyber safe. I'm going to hand over to Stella from TechForGood. She is a social enterprise member, and take it away, Stella.
Hi, so we're a small group today, which is good because it'll give us the opportunity to answer any questions that you've got, so we should have heaps of time. My name is Stella and I'm the founder, and I like to call myself the pretty much everything officer of TechForGood Australia. We're a social enterprise and we're a charity, and we're trying to eat the elephant in chunks, and our chunks are through a profit contribution model. So we donate 50% of our profits to high impact partners, and our high impact partners are Give It and Good Things Foundation. And they are addressing the needs of digitally disadvantaged Australians. Our revenue model to enable us to do that good work is all about the in making technology products and services available to the entire social sector. We specifically support the social sector and all projects that have social sector outcomes. So we're quite unique in that aspect. We make a conscious effort to only support projects and companies that fall within our remit. And we hope to raise $500,000 in the next 3 years to contribute to high impact partners. So that's pretty much what we do. If we can just pop into the next slide, Michael, because I think I've gone all awry, never mind. I was going to do an acknowledgement of country. I am, like Leanne, I'm on Yagara Turrbal country, and I'd like on behalf of TechForGood to acknowledge the traditional owners of the land upon which we meet, and to pay respects to elders present, past and emerging. So I've told you a little bit about me and where I come from and what TechForGood does. Joining me from TechForGood is Torian Diega, and Torian heads up the more technical aspects of the product delivery for TechForGood as the CTO. And then Michael Brook will represent RIPE, one of our partners, and give you a little bit of insight into cybersecurity with a little bit of a twist. I'll let him talk to you about that. So I'll hand over to you, Torian. I'll pop myself on mute and say welcome and nice to see you all.
Unmute, there we go. Thank you everybody for attending today. Yeah, look, from my perspective, Torian, I suppose Chief Technology Officer is probably a very broad base, but I've spent 20 odd years in the technology industry, seen pretty much everything that I suppose technology has thrown at us over those years. And we've very much moved into this social sector to really help, I suppose, shorten and smaller the divide between technology, the way it's used in the social sector versus the way it's used in, I suppose, those larger sectors that have a fairly mature technology model. And cybersecurity is really, guys, it's at the forefront of that. I know Leanne's comment earlier about, hey, if I hide from it, it's going to go away. Unfortunately, the non-for-profit and social sectors are probably the most targeted, or one of the most targeted in Australia. So it is really, really critically important that, you are looking after yourselves. I think there's a statistic that says, 60% of organizations that come under, severe attack of cybersecurity crimes, do not recover from them. So it is an important aspect. And I suppose we are starting our journey and sharing with you this aspect of the requirements around cybersecurity, because it is that critical. Thank you so much for your time today. And at the end of the session, there'll be a little Q&A. And if you have any questions, please reach out. Otherwise, I'll hand over to Michael, who presents our cybersecurity piece from us today. Thank you.
Thanks. I'm Michael Brook, and very happy to be presenting today. So I wanted to try to change the way we talk about cybersecurity. I understand there's a lot of tech terms and there's a lot of drive towards different outcomes out there, and they don't suit all organizational sizes and maturities. So the way I like to talk about it is the same as if we were in Serengeti National Park or somewhere on safari. So just a little bit about me. I am actually now the cybersecurity practice leader for Asia Pacific for Crayon. Crayon is a company that owns Ripe. We are very strongly influenced around social responsibility and doing the right thing by people. We're actually a company that sits, we say it ourselves, we sit on the customer side of the table. And TechForGood are one of our very valued MSPs in Australia, and we're working very closely with them to help social enterprises. I have a personal passion in it as well. I have a charity that I work on with my wife around education, and yeah, this is really important to me. I've been in cybersecurity for a very long time, working with several different cyber vendors, and this is my first time working on the other side of the table and working with partners that work with vendors instead. So it's been a really a good change for me. I'm passionate about what I call just good enough security, and that is doing what you need to be secure, not going out and trying to change the world with it. And I love travel, love exercise, and love to go and fish. And my picture on the left-hand side there, that fish was definitely one that got away. Just like to catch them to see, to try and catch something that's useful to me. But yes, love to get out and about. So what I find when I'm talking to customers primarily, there are three things that come up very, very often. One is that nobody's after me, nobody's going to attack me, are they? Two is, well, I don't have budget for cybersecurity. There's no point starting that conversation now. And then number three is, I actually don't know where to start. Just the same as, you know, when you don't go to the dentist for a period of time, that next trip is going to be expensive because it's going to show things that you didn't know were there. And for a lot of businesses, you know, if you don't know where you are, starting out is going to be or seems to be very painful. So what we try to do today is to change that and show you that that's not the case. It's not that complicated to get started. So you're wondering why we're talking about Safari when we're here with topics such as cybersecurity. It's because safety comes from not being at the rear of the herd. When you're weak, when you are slow, and when you don't have any controls in place, you're easy to be picked off. And we'll go into why that is the case as we go through this presentation. But those at the front, those that are spending lots of money on cybersecurity controls and tools, they're also in a situation that is not necessarily good for them either, because it's very easy to go in the wrong direction. And if you go in the wrong direction, you spend money that you've then got to go and ask for again or request or raise to be able to be in the right direction. So in my experience, the best place to be is actually right in the middle, because you've got safety from all sides. And cyber criminals tend to be opportunistic. Unless you're a critical infrastructure or a financial or a big brand name, most cyber attacks are very much opportunistic, looking for someone to respond and to come back. So my experience is just do enough to be safe. Oops, sorry, next slide. So, love it when that happens. When you have an incident, do you actually have a plan? So there are opportunistic attacks as well. What would you do if your company data was corrupted or if you had a breach? Now think about that. And the way that I think about security is that it's not, cybersecurity is a part of business continuity, a part of business resilience. It is a really important aspect, but think about the situations that have happened in Australia in the last couple of years. We've had pandemic, we've had flood, and we've had fires. And all of those things can stop your business from being able to run. Cyber incident is just another one of those, or data breach as well. So when data gets out that shouldn't. So we need to think, well, how long can we operate without email or without the CRM database, or without other things that your business relies on to be able to run. So having that plan is super, super important. And I think that's a really good place for us to be starting when we're looking at cybersecurity. Predators also exist outside of the Serengeti. Now, we have over 10,000 vendors in cybersecurity selling solutions to try to fit square pegs into round holes. Now, we as customers need to be able to change that view so that we are empowered to say to a vendor, this is the right time for you to come and talk to us. We're ready now to have a conversation about this problem because it's within our planning. We're actually planning to do this, because otherwise, and I've worked for vendors such as Semantic Broadcom and others, you end up with solutions that overwhelm customer, that overwhelm the problem and become a problem in themselves to manage. So very, very focused. I'm very, very focused on making sure that customers get the right solution for what they need to be able to achieve. Security is your business, and I know everyone keeps saying that. You get a lot of comments about, you've got to plan security into your business. You've got to make sure that your security team, if you're a larger organization, is involved in all your decisions. It's really important to make sure that when you are planning, that security is part of that conversation every single time, because when you don't, you end up with drift and you end up with things that can cause you problems over time, new vulnerabilities and new places for somebody to attack if they wanted to. Unfortunately, those amazing employees that you have are your weakest link, because over 50% of breaches are either a cyber attack that was based on a phish. So an email came in, it asked them to enter their Office 365 credentials, which they did because the dialog box looked right. And then they gave the credentials away to somebody that wanted to attack their systems. Or somebody sent out a spreadsheet with personally identifiable information on it. Those two alone make up over 50% of all breaches that happened in 2021 in Australia. And if you look globally, the same sort of thing. So what we're really protecting is our people and helping our people learn how to avoid this. I get emails every 2 days from Australia Post, from Amazon, all asking me to click on a link to put my details in. It is so prevalent now that we need to make sure that our people are aware not to click on links. And if they do, tell somebody about it immediately. I have an example. I signed off on a house last year, and my conveyancer, this is a business email compromise situation. My conveyancer had sent me emails saying, I'll never ask for payment over email. On the day of settlement, my conveyancer sent me an email saying, can you pay the money? Can you pay me the funds now? So he had taken the signature off the bottom that said, do not pay via email. And he was asking me to pay via email now. So I called him, went through the process, knew it was the right person, paid the money. On my way to that property, I got a phone call from somebody claiming to be PIXA saying, you need to make this transaction and do this now. I have no idea how that happened. I don't know whether somebody had intercepted and knew what was going on. But these breaches are happening to organizations every day now, where somebody injects themselves into a supply chain and requests money from an organization. And again, it's people, it's actually us that are making those mistakes. So we've got to protect our people from that through training and through education. Because data is the most valuable asset that your business has. And when we look at it, that's actually all that we're trying to protect. The data is at the middle, unless you're a plumber, or an electrician. Data is what is your most important asset. It is where everything is stored, and it's how you run your business. So being able to manage and create a risk plan around that is really, really important. And that needs to include things like your people and your devices, networks, etc., to make sure that you are as secure as possible. Even if we look through the chain of how people access information, it's an identity, that's the person logging in. It's a device, the mobile or the laptop that they work on. They use a network, maybe the internet, maybe a VPN. They get to an application. and that application lets them get to the data. But everything is about, at the end of the day, is about data, and it's making sure that that is safe. But if we go back to what I said before, it's also making sure that if we have an outage, because a cyber attack, it's very unlikely you can prevent one forever. These sorts of things will happen. It's being able to get it back quickly, being able to recover your systems quickly and be up and running again. Cybersecurity is a really critical part of your business. It is a business process that you need to make sure is baked into what you're doing. And it's a continual process over time, which is why I have this circle here. If we look at the cycle, the international frameworks will add another element to this called identify, but for small to mid-sized social enterprises, that's probably not so relevant. But make sure that you have recovery processes in place. You know how to get back your CRM system, the system that has all your personal, all of your important customer information in it. Protect and make sure that if something does happen, that the effect is limited. Protect the data, make sure that you have just the right amount of permissions to it. Being able to respond and restrict how far an incident can go. So if a hacker gets onto a machine, stopping them to being able to get to other machines or get other credentials that can spread their effect. And then last, being able to detect when something happens. For small organizations, that's probably an afterthought. You really just want to protect. Make sure you can protect and recover is the most important thing. And that's why we leverage a framework, and that's why it's really important to have something that you can rely on and that you can benchmark against. People, process, and then software is what will make you secure. Software is a result of working through process, working through people, working through partners like TechForGood to make sure that you've got the right controls in place for your social enterprise. So the first thing that I would recommend you do is go to something like the ACSC site and do their cybersecurity assessment, because their cybersecurity assessment is really easy to follow through. Anybody can follow it through. It's asking you the level of maturity that you think you have in various elements of cyber. And at the end of it, it will come out with information that says, these are the things you should do first. The ACSC also has a lot of other good information there as well that will help you enhance the security within your organization. But also TechForGood can help you with automated risk assessments as well. So taking that a step further and then being able to automate that process and actually interrogate your systems rather than just a questionnaire, although a questionnaire is always part of it, because people are super important, people and process in any cyber plan. Just the last thing there, it is super important to know what you don't know, which is why that risk assessment and then being able to run them ongoing is really important. Now, I'm really passionate about what Microsoft can do in this area. And it's strange. I came from a vendor side of the table. I worked for vendors who sold against Microsoft, and now I work really closely with Microsoft product. Why? Because it's really cheap. For what you get, it's really cheap, and it will give you really good coverage of cybersecurity, but also a whole lot of other things that we'll cover in a little bit more detail. One, for some social enterprises, it's free for a number of their users, and it's cheap for all of the other users as well. But TechForGood can help with how that looks. But when we're looking at the Essential 8, which is the framework that I want to focus on today, it gives you coverage of 7.5 of those 8. So it will really help you uplift your security game. Now, in the future, you may decide that I need to protect data that's going out of my org. So if information goes to the wrong participant or wrong receiver, then make sure that it's encrypted so they can't access it. You have that capability already within that license to be able to apply those controls in the future. So again, it's one license that gives you all of that security, as well as your Office apps and your virtual desktop and other business continuity functions too. So for me, we want to achieve just good enough security. Just good enough security, again, puts you in the middle of the pack, puts you where you are least, where you don't stand out and where you're least likely to be the subject of an attack. When we buy a security product generally, what do we actually use within it? Now, my experience working for vendors is about 20 to 50%. No one ever uses everything. Tools can do so much because customers ask for added features, but that's one customer and they'll have 10,000 others who just do one or two things. So don't buy features that you can't find use for when you buy it, but plan for the future. So think in the example I just used, is information protection or data loss prevention something that I'm going to use in 12 months' time? And then maybe consider that. But right size what you do, because otherwise you overspend. And you also find when you have two security tools, there's overlap. So it's also important to be able to understand, I've got two products here. Do they cover one another? Can I actually get rid of one of those and actually save myself some outgoings every month? And build on known frameworks. So to get to that just good enough security, build on known frameworks, because then you can apply controls to help solve those challenges over time. So the framework for us in Australia is the ASD Essential 8. It is based on international standards, including NIST and CIS 18. So it's been built over a long time. 2017, 2018 was when the latest version of it came out, but it's been around since the early teens in a different form. So it's been built over time and it's really relevant for our businesses today. It will give you the security that you need, the just good enough security. When I look at what that looks like, now the smart amongst us will actually realize that we talk about the Essential 8, but there's 9 here. That's because one of them is important enough to break out into 2. And when we look at this, that's the recovery element. So make sure that backups are running, and backups are always running every single night. When a cyber attacker looks to ransomware your organization, they stop the backups, they make sure the backups aren't running for 30 days or whatever the retention period is, and then they ransomware your data. So make sure that your backups work every night, because 2 things. One is you can recover to 12 hours ago, but second, it may be a sign of something going on. If the backups haven't been working for 20 days, it may actually be a sign that somebody is attacking you already. But also make sure you have a way to recover and get access to that data. For example, not even cyber related, but if you have an office location, how do your people access it from home? Maybe they need to be able to connect from home because there is flooding or there is some other event that stops you being able to go to your office. The fact that you are social organizations or social enterprises most likely means the time that you're needed is when there is a disaster, is when there is something going wrong. So you really need to make sure that you can always get to your data wherever you are. When we move on to the protection element, the areas here that are most important: application control, being able to block and stop applications from running is one way to stop malware from being able to infect a machine. User receives an email, that email has an executable in it, block that executable from being able to run, and then malware can't happen. And because what traditionally happens is the user clicks on the malware runs a PowerShell script and then grabs a credential database or starts to try to move along across machines. So preventing that from happening is a really good way of controlling and stopping a breach, stopping it from being able to get any further. Also, making sure that you have your updates and patches for applications, but also operating systems, which is in the respond area, ensures that zero-day vulnerabilities don't happen. Last week, Apple announced an urgent patch for what they call a zero-click breach, which means if you see the particular URL, then it's already infected your machine. Those sorts of things happen all the time now. So making sure that you are patching the apps that are on your machine and the operating system as well, so Windows 10, Windows 11, ensures that those 0 days, 0 clicks can't affect your organization either. The Office macro settings here, again, if you're not using macros within your organization, why are you running them? And I find this a lot of the time. There'll be a couple of people within a business that actually use macros. Everyone else uses the tools in a fairly rudimentary way. So maybe block those macros for everybody else. But just doing that limits the way that an attacker can get into your machine and then can start to do things with it. Because macros allow you to run executables and other sorts of scripts that automate processes. The application hardening here, the last element of protect, really important too. And these things you don't have to think about for two reasons. One is that organizations like TechForGood can actually help you implement these, but they're also in that license. So they're in the business premium license. You enable them and let them run, because user application hardening is about making sure that on your machine, you don't have all of the other things running that don't need to be. It's a corporate machine. Do you need Media Player to be installed on there? You don't use Media Player, you're using an in-browser Media Player, for example. So those sorts of things, being able to protect and limit the effect is really important. And then the last elements there on the respond area, restricting administrative credentials. What tends to happen with businesses is that they have too many administrators. Everybody is an admin on their local machine, and they have administrators for their Office 365 tenant. They have a spread because people have come into these roles over time, or when you've tried to fix a problem, you haven't been able to fix the problem, so you just added somebody into the admin group. This is a bit more complicated to do, and this is something that you would use TechForGood to help you with. You know, you may be able to get there by yourselves, but using an organization like TechForGood and also using a risk assessment or a security assessment is going to tell you where these permissions are and make it easier for you to be able to remove them and make your organization secure. The last element there is the most important one of all. If you implement multi-factor authentication, you reduce your risk of password-related breach by 99.9%, according to Microsoft. I hate stats, but this one makes complete sense, because if someone gets your password, phishing email comes in, they put the username and password into the dialog box. The hacker still can't get to your system because it's got to get a two-factor token as well. Now, there will be vendors that say, well, MFA has been broken. It's not entirely true, and it still limits your effect, or it still limits the effect that a cyber breach or cyber attack can have on you just by putting MFA in place. That if there was one thing that you could do, that is the biggest reduction in cyber breach that you can possibly bring to your organization. If you implement these 8 controls, the ACSC say you reduce your cyber risk by 85%. And that's a really good place to be. It's not expensive to do, and it gets you to a level where your organization is going to be secure enough to move forward and be relatively comfortable. There are a whole lot of other controls, and TechForGood can help you with those. So we use a scorecard, and you can go through the scorecard in bold, the essential 8. And there are a whole lot of other things that over time you may decide you also want to do, or you may not, because every organization is different, and the cyber controls that you need to implement are also different. We'll share this after the presentation, so it might be hard to read now, but you can definitely have a copy, and it will help you with understanding what you think your risk is and how complicated it is to implement that control, and then build in some timings to be able to implement it. So in summary, the Serengeti can be safe, and so can the internet. Now, I don't completely agree with being in an open top vehicle right next to lions. Maybe I would do it if there's a lot of people who've done it before me, but I think I still have a little bit of fear about being that close to something that can eat you. But it can keep you safe. Doing the right things is going to put you in the middle of the herd and make you as safe as you can possibly be. Because if you're not a target, you are going to be attacked by an opportunistic attack. And this happens all the time. It doesn't, I think Stella said at the beginning about the likelihood of cyber attack. Actually, it might not have been, might have been my first question. The reality is, those email addresses that are collected for spamming are from previous breaches, from third-party supplier breaches, are from lists that they've got off LinkedIn, because 500 million accounts or 75 million accounts were breached one time in the past. An email goes out to all of those addresses, and some of those will be employees at your organization. It's just somebody clicking on an email at the wrong time that makes you a target of breach, because as soon as you start to interact with them, then they're going to do, then they're going to follow through. So don't make yourself a target. Make it as hard as possible, firstly, for one of your staff members to make the mistake of clicking, but then second, providing protection so that a hacker can't get any further, because they're always looking for an easy attack, not a hard attack, not something that's difficult to do. So if you are secure, those risks become manageable. And as you are moving on, as you are evolving your organization and you're adding new SaaS platforms and other things into your business, make sure that you think of security every time. I have a new SaaS platform. Can I make that single sign-on with Azure AD or Okta or whatever you're using? Every time, think, how can I make the new platform that I'm adding secure and part of my standardized operating environment? So just good enough security means use a framework, and this is in no particular order, but use a framework to benchmark how you're doing over time, how you're improving your security maturity, but also make sure you're running risk assessments over time or security assessments to see if there's any drift, because you can drift when a shadow IT app is added or something else, and it takes you away from that baseline that you've set and makes you more subject to attack. Teach your people to be cyber aware, to know that if something looks too good to be free, it is too good to be free. It's not. Stop doing that. Review the capabilities in the software that you've got and use TechForGood to do that. So you often have a product that has overlap with another product, especially in the security arena. You don't need both, because both of them are probably going to give you 80% coverage. Make sure you are completing that risk assessment. So the security baseline is to keep you current and make sure that your environment looks good. The risk assessment is the piece that says, what am I doing today? What are my most important data points? How important is that data to me? And how much does it cost me to protect that data? Because if that data is critical, then you're going to protect it at all costs. In social organizations, one of the things that you deal with is information for people that are potentially less fortunate. So less fortunate may mean they're more susceptible to a cyber attack. If your data is stolen, it's information about citizens, and those citizens would then become a target for attack. So we've got to think about that, and that risk assessment is, how do I make sure the data that I'm a custodian of is secure and nobody can get access to it? By the way, a lot of that is controlled by the operating system. So if it's on Azure, a lot of it is all encrypted and all safe, but that's just an aside. Implement the Essential 8 controls and make security part of your business. You don't have to go deep into it. You just have to think when you're implementing new solutions, when you're looking at expanding, when you're adding new users, think security every time. What do I want? What do I expect my employees to do? Do I need to run security awareness training at everybody as they start, all the way through to new platform, new system? How do I make sure it's secure? And then if you need security, talk to TechForGood, because they know how to do this, and they've done this with other social enterprises. So basically, security does not have to be expensive to stand out. It's sort of an oxymoron, because you actually want to be in the middle of the herd, but it doesn't cost a lot to get yourselves secure enough so that you're not going to be a target, so that you're not going to be the next organization that gets breached. And if there is an attack, if somebody does click on an email they shouldn't, that attack's not going to get very far. So for additional resources, as I said earlier, the ACSC is really good. So cyber.gov.au is a really good place to start, because it will help you understand where you are now, maturity that you have with different controls within your business, with backups, with MFA, with other things. And that's a good exercise for you to go through, and then go to TechForGood and say, this is what the questionnaire shows, and then ask them, how can we start to uprate your security? Feel free to connect with me on LinkedIn, or I have a blog site as well. As I said throughout this thing, just good enough security is what's really important to me, because I want organizations to be secure at the lowest possible cost, because otherwise it just costs too much money and it's a never-ending cycle. Nowadays, we're looking at subscription for everything. If you do and implement a control, you're going to need another subscription and another subscription as time goes on. So I like to try to prevent that and minimize that as much as possible. So any questions? I would love to answer any questions now, or please, if you want to connect with me or ask questions afterwards, we can answer them after the event.
Yeah, I got a question. As most of us now run our businesses through our mobile phones, just about, you just about do everything that way. That's probably the one area I do need to look into for security, of how to protect through your mobile. Yeah.
A couple of areas. So if it's a personal device and you don't want it Azure AD registered, there's two parts to this. If it's an iOS device, it's basically secure anyway. There are exceptions, but it's basically secure. Android less so, because people can root them and do other things to get in. So first thing is, iOS is relatively secure, which is why antivirus on iOS is very limited, because antivirus can't get in and do the things it wants. But within that business premium license, you have a couple of elements called, one is Intune, which works with mobile devices, Android, iOS, Linux, Mac, Windows. It will run Defender, so the endpoint detection response solution, plus also protection and other elements on those devices as well, to secure them and make sure they are either within corporate policy. So, for example, if an Android device has been rooted, do you want that device to be able to connect to your organization, or an iOS device? And you can block that and stop that being able to run. So you can also say, if it's below this iOS version, can't connect to my environment too. And they're all rules that are included in that license. Or you can require MFA as well. So if you want that device to connect, it has to do an MFA because it's a personal device. On the other hand, if you just want to protect your corporate app, so you have Outlook, SharePoint Online, and other things, and you want your users to be able to access that from their mobile device, you can stop them from being able to copy stuff from that into their iCloud or any personal app on the device. And when they leave, it can delete just those apps. And those machines do not need to be registered or anything. It's just a policy that's within Intune. So it will make your end user devices secure without them being registered to Azure AD. So your clients can access the data but not take it with them and not share it. But basically, iOS is relatively secure, Android a little bit less so, but you are fairly secure with the device because of the way that Apple sandboxes everything on it. Does that help?
Yes, thanks. Yeah, just a few areas to work on the apps. You're doing more and more through your phone every day. It's just sort of the way business is heading. So it's always one of those worries of, does that lead to problems?
Yeah. So if it's an Android device, you can run the Defender for endpoint on it anyway. You can run or an element on it. So
I do use Android.
Yeah. So Android definitely is all included in it.
I think from my perspective, it's a good point, because we've got multiple considerations, and for me, phone loss is I have had a history of misplacing my phone, and it can really detrimentally impact your business. And that really goes back to Michael's point earlier in the presentation about, it's not just cyber attacks that we need to be aware of, it's the recovery and having a plan in place that if I did lose my phone, and I did a couple of weeks ago, that I've got the bouncing ball to follow to be able to implement everything that I need to do my job and not have to sit for 3 days while I re-implement and revalidate my identity and all of the things that go with it. So yeah, good. It's a good point, Michael.
Awesome. Are there any other questions? Like I say, please reach out after as well, and we will address anything that we can.
Stella, so Mike's mentioned a couple of things that we could talk to TechForGood about. So whether it's security or whatever. So what other sorts of things, because you said you're tech in the for-purpose sector, what other sorts of things are you doing and offering, and how else could little social enterprises, micro baby businesses, how do we, I guess, because we do a lot of things ourselves and we don't have an IT department, what are the sort of things is that the sort of thing that maybe we could talk to you about?
Yeah, absolutely. I'm trying to probably talk to you about the technical aspects of it, but certainly what we offer is a hybrid approach. So making sure that you understand what you need, the information that you need to capture. So you can go away and do that yourself, or we can assist you in pulling that information together. We also have an automated tool that we can run with you on a cycle, and all of those services are offered at vastly discounted rates. It depends on the organization and how many users are in that organization, but they certainly are within the price point of small social sector organizations. That's what we're here to do. We're looking to address the gap that sits between technology providers charging an arm and a leg for consultancy services and offering pragmatic services and solutions, and then and we sit in the middle. So for example, if you wanted to do the automated service, we would work with you and your team. We would work out how to capture the data and then work through the automated assessment and findings process. Other customers might say, well, I'm pretty savvy, I can do it myself. And, then we would just literally sit with you and say, hey, here's the framework, which is readily available to everybody. We don't charge for that. Complete it yourself. Call us if you have a question. We do a lot of pro bono work. We do a lot of answering of questions. So I hope that to answer your question, that the services that we offer in this space will always be cost effective, if not free, and highly subsidized.
Yeah, and just to add to that, I suppose, the reason why we are also a social enterprise and also a not-for-profit was that, during COVID, we realized that there was so much need in the space, the real need, the people that are doing the real good. And having worked with, large organizations, enterprises and governments that have, all of the security advice at hand, they've got all the vendors, available to them all the time, selling them services. They've also got the buying power of many as well. So if you consider the fact that an enterprise might have 2,000 users, well, guess what? They get a massive discount because of that. And they can negotiate, pricing. And unfortunately, small organizations and social enterprises don't typically always get that, those values, if you like. Now, the world is changing. The non-for-profit sector is certainly getting more and more looked after in the space. We see Microsoft giving away, we talk about business premium. If you're a non-for-profit, you can benefit from 10 premium licenses at no cost. And what we are trying to do is advocate on the social enterprise and give the social enterprise that same capacity to leverage the services that we all desperately need to support our businesses. And we're working really hard in the background to make that happen. We're working to make sure that your actual devices are cost effective, that you're not going to JB Hi-Fi to buy retail pricing for your laptops and your computers. So even the simple things that the day-to-day stuff that we use, we're trying to help you really benefit from the ability of the social enterprise and across those segments, being able to have the purchasing power that should be afforded to the many thousands of social enterprises that are in Australia alone. So great question, Leanne.
Yeah, and it does sort of feel like we are that forgotten middle, because we don't get to tick the box that says not for profit.
No.
And we're too small to be the small business. I mean, not all of us, obviously. There's all different, and I guess that's the thing. There's all different shapes, sizes, legal models, structures, business models of social enterprise that sometimes it's hard to sort of find where we fit and who can help us. So yeah, and it's also for me, great to speak to people who actually understand social enterprise, because talking to muggles, and I say muggles, talking to muggles, sometimes they don't quite get why we don't just want to make money, and why we have customers and beneficiaries, and why we have potentially 2 different data segments.
Yeah. And that's exactly what it's about. You know, the more time we spend in the sector, we're growing up with the sector, if you like, and we're learning along that. And you know, we have so many organizations that are coming to us, and it's kind of interesting, because in our previous lives, you know, we would be going out there and selling our services really hard. You know, you've got a sales team, you've got a marketing team. Well, what's interesting about this sector is that there's a lot of need, and a lot of people trust that they can actually come to us with those needs. Now, the interesting thing about cybersecurity is, believe it or not, most organizations don't want to talk about the risk that they have, or the cybersecurity threats that they've already experienced. So you've almost got this quiet sector, or because what happens is that, you know, if you've been under attack, and we have worked with a lot of organizations that are trying to recover from a cybersecurity attack. Now, typically they don't want the world to know that, so you're not also seeing what is actually happening out there, and hence the fact that it is a very, very real risk. And it was one of the first things that we said we needed to actually share and try and find ways of helping. And I think, as Mike said, the real value of this is that you don't have to spend a fortune to do it. And that is why in the social sector, and certainly those top 8 areas to look at, are very achievable for any of the organizations in the space. Yes, you know, not everybody understands that, you know, our infrastructure and our services are all in the cloud now, so we don't need to back them up. Well, yes, you still do, because if you do lose them, and I think for me, you know, running a social enterprise, it's the cost to recover. All of that time that you spend, and we all have, I don't think there's a person here that doesn't spend, you know, thousands of hours investing in your marketing, your materials, everything that goes with it. Leanne, you mentioned in QSEC, you know, the amount of information and the libraries of information that you have built over a period of time. Well, that is an inordinate amount of your time and effort that's gone into that, and to lose that and to have to recover from that, if you've got to start from scratch, that is the problem and the challenge that we're trying to solve for first. And you just don't need to overcommit to doing that. You don't need, you know, an expensive tier 1 organization coming to you with a, hey, let's solve your problem, and here's a very, very large number to do so.
Yeah, self-help, you know, if you're aware of what your self-help options are, you know, you've taken a massive step in the right directions in the first place. And I think that's where we hope to come in, just to spread some, with Michael's help, give some good information to the industry that helps them to help themselves in a pragmatic way, and reduce risk. Because at the end of the day, our businesses we're trying to do some good things with our businesses, but not going to help if we don't have a business because our server burnt down in a fire, or we were subject to a cyber attack. Yeah, so always happy, and much like Michael, we've not shared our LinkedIn profiles, but always happy to answer a question and take a call. We talk to people all the time, so more than happy to do that.
Thank you so much, everybody. Now I'm going to send around the recording and all the links and anything and everything, and whatever I meant to say, and everybody will get that. And you can reach out to Stella and TechForGood, and yeah, hopefully, if you do have any other questions, please send them through to me, and I can forward them to Stella. But yeah,
Leanne, can I just add a comment really quickly? Just from working with different not-for-profit bodies, so from your very small social enterprises to your incorporated not-for-profits.
Yep.
You know, I'm hearing this thing within here. What have I got? You've got very little security and knowledge. You've got databases of personal information of the people you want to be supporting,
yes.
And that is very valuable in itself. And you've got grant money sitting in your accounts,
yes.
with all of these things. Right, that was an exceptional summary of very key points. So I'd encourage everybody who is watching this recording to actually save it and go back over it as they're reading that Essential 8 and to connect with Tech4Good, because this was very, very good. When you talk about the small social enterprises, if you want to be able to survive, an attack on your organisation at a small level is going to impact your ability to survive. And once you're any type of larger organisation, New South Wales Family Planning was attacked on Anzac Day. Recently, we've had the C-Stars breach, which was the CRM. They have 90 provider clients. Between them, they had around 1,200 individual staff and client personal information leaked. The Red Cross was breached and had to go offline completely for a while. So I just love what you guys are doing. I absolutely really encourage everyone listening to get in contact with Tech4Good, and I really very much mean that, to take those steps and also to bookmark it for when you do get attacked. I've worked with a number of organisations who may have that email that says, "Hey Jane, your CEO here, can you go over and get those cards?" They don't even realise that's actually a real thing. It's likely someone has breached their system and has been sitting in there for a long time, looking to find out who's who, using actual names, and it is a very real thing. So ID Care on the Sunshine Coast works Australia-wide for victim support. So for those social enterprises who have people within the community who may have had their own identity or romance fraud happen, they are there for free to support. But as an organisation, no matter what size, I really appreciate you guys and Mike, you putting that information across. It was really right on point. And thank you, Torian and Stella, for continuing to raise awareness.
Thank you so much. Those are lovely comments, and I'll echo your thanks, Michael. Thank you. You presented in a beautiful way and very easy to understand way, in a sector relevant way. So thank you. I really appreciate it.
You're welcome. Yeah, you're absolutely correct. The business email compromise is probably the biggest risk now, because it just requires a little bit of knowledge, and we have everything on Facebook. We have everything about us and the business. It's easy enough to find the details. So yeah, a very big. It's definitely a big problem now.
Yeah. Awesome. Thank you so much, everybody.